from this white saviorism to being in relationship. Lessons from the apple tree is that there's so much abundance in nature. All of our needs can be met. Spend time sitting in front of the fire, acknowledging the darkness. Human conflict and strife is like just so unnecessary, and just trying to breathe into the now and then do the next right thing.
Welcome to the Spacious Unknown. I'm your host, Kat Butchentini. This podcast is a place where stories of spiritual lives can be shared, especially those that don't follow a straight line. Stories shaped by curiosity and doubt, tenderness and intuition, grief and joy, and the quiet practice of inner listening. Before we begin, a gentle note. Spirituality is alive and always unfolding. What you hear here is one moment in time, one expression of someone's path. I invite you to listen with grace, curiosity, and a tenderness that leaves room for nuance rather than neat conclusions. Today I'm joined by Sheena, and I invite you to settle in as we explore the shape of her journey. I'm going to just start us off with a little centering and grounding, and I'll have you, during this, describe the space that you're in as we go through each of the senses.
Sounds good.
Yeah. So close your eyes, or you can let them rest open somewhere if that's more comfortable for you. And have you start by noticing the places where your body touches the space around you.
So I'm noticing how I'm sitting in this chair and how my feet are resting on the blanket underneath the dust. My hands are holding a cup of warm tea. I'm imagining roots stretching into the ground, extending from my toes through the floor to the soil beneath the house. It's been very dry and cold these last few winter weeks, but I'm hearing and feeling the heat from the floor heater or the forced air heater in the house, and hearing the hum of the furnace many rooms away and the warmth that brings, but also the dryness of the air, which is unusual for this time of year.
So take a sip of your tea. Just notice what tastes are lingering in your mouth from that.
Well, it is a decaffeinated Earl Grey with oat milk, so the citrus and the tannins of the tea mingled with the earthiness and the texture of the oat milk.
And as you follow your breath down into your lungs, just noticing the way your body shifts to accommodate it.
Yes, your listeners should know that there's another being occupying my body as I'm very close to having a baby. And so my lungs are very compressed. I cannot breathe as deeply as I normally could. My breath is short and shallow. Someone else is taking up space.
I'm going to invite you to see if you can find a place of stillness within your body. It can be really small, like a speck. And just notice where it is, where you're holding it.
Probably in my forehead. My body is not entirely my own, so this small person keeps moving. So I don't feel a lot of stillness unless they're sleeping.
I'm just going to invite you to kind of breathe into that place of stillness in your forehead. Just staying there as long as you need. Whenever you're ready, you can open your eyes and rejoin me.
Okay.
Welcome. Why don't you tell our listeners who you are? What your current life situation is?
Mhm. My name is Sheena. I go by she, her pronoun. My life situation. That's a big question, yeah. Life situation is that I'm on the precipice of becoming a mother for the first time. I'm a small business owner in partnership with my partner and husband, Brian. I live in the Pacific Northwest, and we're having an unusually dry and sunny winter. Oh yeah, I cannot neglect that I am also a dog mother. She would be upset if I left her out.
Great, thank you. Let's start a little bit with what your spiritual background is. What's your story? Where does it start? Start at the beginning.
So, in terms of spiritual background, my grandfather always said that your father gives you three gifts: your name, your faith, and your education. So, faith was one of those three gifts that my family um, gave to me as a young person. Both my maternal and paternal grandparents retired from their respective military branches in Southern California. My parents met in Southern California, and they both come from very strong, large, conservative Catholic backgrounds. And that was my upbringing. I went to school at a Catholic school. I went to church at the parish up the road. My uncle was a priest. He recently passed away. But yeah, so it was just sort of a given that you would be Roman Catholic and all that that entails, including confirmation, all of the sacraments, the expectation that I would get married in the Catholic Church. As a young person, I was involved in the youth group. It was funny that they didn't have an adult leader at one point, so they allowed us as 18-year-olds to run the youth group. So I was running the Catholic youth group in my parish while I was attending a Catholic university after going to a Catholic elementary school and a Catholic all-girls high school. So if that doesn't paint a picture, I don't know what else will. I mean, uniform and everything. So yeah, that is the beginning.
You mentioned sacraments and confirmation. Can you just explain what confirmation is for people?
Oh, that is just sort of a rite of passage that one undergoes to say, in the Catholic tradition, they believe in mostly infant baptism, which is not a choice of an infant. Rather, it is, again, a gift the family provides, a welcoming from the very onset of one's life. So confirmation is an opportunity as more of an adult to declare that this is the faith that you have chosen and a path that you choose to walk.
Are there any sacraments that were important for you growing up, or any other practices or experiences that were meaningful?
I think I really liked Holy Week. It was a week leading up to Easter, so starting with getting ashes on your forehead and the remembering that from dust to dust.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to Catholic school too, so not only did we go to I spent a lot of time in church. So church at school, but also church at the family. It was sort of that Easter Holy Week. You'd spend from like Wednesday through Sunday at church every day. I thought that was important and significant growing up. What else? I think I also remember having this like deep sense that if you prayed for someone, my understanding is that like you could influence the outcome. I think that was of how things went. Prayer seemed to be attached to outcomes. If someone was sick, you prayed for them to get better. A lot of petitioning God for the well-being of others. But I think as I got a little bit older, again, out of the elementary school years and into college, what was definitely more important to me was the Catholic social teaching, especially working for, but also with folks on the margins of society. I met a priest while I was attending the University of Portland who lived downtown in Old Town, Portland, where there was a lot of poverty and a lot of homelessness and a lot of addiction. And he really had a different approach than other priests that I had interacted with, and in terms of shifting the service work that parish did. My brain isn't working. It's like, I guess, like I had in high school or even elementary school, there were lots of like missionary projects that we helped raise money for, or donations we did. And it definitely was this like based in this idea that we could help people and that they needed our help. And it was really very like it was very much based on like charity, where work that was being done at the downtown chapel, now St. Andre Bessette in downtown Portland, was being in community with people, all sorts of people. And again, this priest was Ron Rab. And yeah, it just was eye-opening to just be in this place where, as a young person, I was choosing to spend my Friday nights, busing in the rain from the University of Portland campus downtown, and spending my Friday nights or even Friday mornings, like whatever worked with my schedule, to like be in community with. I even had a relative like visit me while I was in Portland, and we had this interesting interaction where he's more of a cousin of my mother, but kind of an uncle figure. So Uncle Mark tried to put, as we were walking in downtown Portland, he tried to put himself, as we were approaching this gentleman on the street who was, sort of waking up from whatever nap he was taking. Mark tried to position himself between me and this other gentleman living on the street, obviously homeless. And he was just floored because it was like, "Oh, hey, Richard, how's it going?" And I don't even remember the conversation, but Mark had to report back to my mom and my Nana that, "Did you know that Sheena's like on first name basis with all the homeless men downtown?" Like that really threw him as a New Yorker culturally. But it's just like I had relationships with people and I knew their stories, and that was way more meaningful than any ritual or charity fundraiser or what have you. Yeah, just witnessing people's stories and sharing my own.
Is there, well, you mentioned Catholic social teaching, so I'm wondering if there's something more that you wanted to share about what that is. And
not specifically, like I wouldn't remember all of the tenets now, but I will say that like in terms of like where I butted heads with, and again, like it was funny that the University of Portland was one of the first places where I was sort of outside of my Catholic bubble, where I went to school with lots of different people from different Christian faith backgrounds at the University of Portland, some of whom were more evangelical Protestant and had this idea of like faith alone will save you, where my upbringing was like, no, faith without works is dead. And that was sort of a difference, in the, I don't want to like devolve into like all the different flavors of Christianity, but that also always struck me as something quite odd that that I was meeting and friends with or even dating, like were just much more preoccupied with reading a book and memorizing verses and this perception of being holy, but they were, more interested in those pursuits than fighting for economic and social changes that affected people not only within their faith circles, but you know, in our immediate community. So yeah, it was just sort of interesting, like, oh, like it kind of this awakening to like, oh, like I thought we were all on the same team and we all had this shared values, and just kind of teasing out that it plays out a little bit differently based on the emphasis of one's upbringing, I suppose, or the focus. Because again, in my own family or in my own faith communities, things were very focused on doing the work of faith in terms of meeting the needs of people around us. As I was moving, becoming an adult, shifting from this white saviorism to being in relationship with all members of my community, and being willing to accept lessons and learning and teachings from even the people who were unsheltered or unhoused in my community.
So it sounds like your spirituality was pretty intricately tied to your faith during that time of your life. And I'm just curious if there were aspects that felt spiritual to you that weren't supported by your faith or weren't like necessarily tied directly into your faith, or if it felt pretty holistic, like everything was kind of tied together.
I think, like I said, like that's a good thing to tease out. I think as I was realizing that different veins of Christian churches had different beliefs or different focuses. It's like, when you're in college, you get to vote for the first time. And I had always voted a certain way based on my faith. But, when things like marriage equality, like hit the ballot, like, again, I ran into this moral injury of like, oh, like, I don't understand how my faith or my background would say that marriage equality isn't in alignment. Like if God is love, then, or even like the separation of church and state, like as from a democratic perspective, like, as an American, I should be protecting the rights of all people, irregardless of what they believe. So I kept finding little spaces where I met these moral injuries of like, I thought we had shared values, but I found that not to be true. And I think that's an important part of growing up, like moving beyond being an adolescent at home and being immersed in a community where everyone is sort of homogenous. You don't question anything, but when you get to start making your own decisions, you start questioning and realizing that there are sharper edges or divisions that you were just wholly unaware of. I noticed it for the first time, like my mom referring to like the women who lived across the street as roommates. I'm like, no, they're definitely a couple. And, just things that got glossed over. So that was really challenging. Yeah. So that was the beginning of a divergence, if you will.
I want to go back a little bit and talk about this thing we call God. It's a lot of people call it God. There's a lot of other names that people use to refer to a presence or a force, or maybe even something that is simply there and doesn't have any sort of interaction with us. And I'm curious what that looked like for you growing up. And you mentioned God is love. And so was that always the case for you growing up? What was your first concept of like this idea of a divinity? Is that still part of the way that you like, interact with your spirituality? And
yeah, so I would consider myself like someone who's like recovering Catholic, and not even necessarily Catholic in the traditional sense. But as I mentioned before, like the idea of God was very prescriptive. It was something that was given to me in the Catholic Church. Only priests are male. Like it was very much steeped in patriarchy and male language and male imagery, where I have this like sense of like, oh, I want to be a priest when I grow up. Like they only work on Sundays. That sounds great. get to like help people all the time and like hang out. So I'm like a great career. Oh, women aren't priests. So yeah, the shifting of that idea again started in college. Sue Monk Kidd's Dance of the Dissonant Daughter. Have you read that book by chance? Mm. That's a great one. She grew up Southern Baptist and was steeped in that community, and reading her process of falling in love or under like shifting her perspective to the divine feminine was really helpful. The female face of God. I also had a really wonderful mentor who on the University of Portland campus who was in the, what do they call it? Like the faith ministry or whatever. She was like a ministry person on campus. She's actually now a Roman Catholic priest. There's actually a break-off group of rogue women Catholic priests. Yeah, like because she was working. This is a tangent, but yeah, she's awesome. Like she recently got ordained last year, and I went to her ordination. Her community was a Lutheran and Catholic community that had been, I think, over 40 years. I'm going to misspeak because I don't know their history, but you know, they had been worshiping together for 40 years, and it was this ecumenical idea and movement. However, the Catholic bishop in Portland shut it down and wouldn't allow any priests to go and serve and do mass at their community. So there is an option for women to become a priest, and her community asked Lindsay to step up and get ordained, and she did. I mean, she had the training and experience of any priest and masters in divinity. And yeah, so it's just interesting to see how spirituality is like held back by all these silly rules when we're just trying to, again, be in community together. So I don't want my focus to be on like this misunderstanding of rules or regulations or things that are more right for people than others, like, because that's not where I find myself at all anymore. I think, again, I'm using this word more, or the term moral injury over and over again, but I think that's just what it was. It just was like, I really thought I grew up with people with shared values and focus on community and the community's well-being. And that makes more sense than priests can only be male, or you can only do this a certain way, or marriage is only defined in this way. Like, I don't think God is limited in any way. So why are we putting these limits on people? They are made in the image of God. So things just stopped making sense. And my partner is not religious at all. He actually has a lot of trauma in his background around religion. That's not a place that he spends any of his time. Like, his spirit is nurtured by being out in nature. And since leaving university, and I have found that is very similar for myself. Again, kind of following that pattern of like trying to find community and faith, like I did. Well, in college, I was part of like a faith and leadership house, kind of modeled after the Jesuit Volunteer Corps, and I did the Jesuit Volunteer Corps for a year and committed to a year of service. It's kind of like an AmeriCorps program, and it was part AmeriCorps, part JVC. The details don't matter, but I spent a year after my time at the University of Portland working in the women's domestic violence shelter here in town. And that really shifted my career away from pursuing education to be, a high school English teacher. And, I just jumped 2 feet into social work here in Portland instead, based on that experience. But getting back to like the idea of God, I think as I moved further away from my nuclear family and where I grew up, my sense of God really expanded here in the Northwest. And I currently find spiritual nourishment in nature, or the unlimited face of the divine. So we haven't even like touched on that. But the background is like having to let go of so much and do a lot of unlearning of really unhealthy and like really toxic. Yeah, just letting that all fall, like the things that no longer serve me. Like I'm grateful I had a happy childhood, like things felt very secure, and the tradition, like there's many traditions and rituals that are really lovely that were nurturing growing up, and I don't find them helpful as an adult living my own life now. I'm more in tuned with what's growing in my garden or the seasons, I guess they shift here in the Northwest. That feels far more nourishing than what I found in any church.
Mhm. You mentioned the unlimited face of God, and I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about who God is to you now, or what God is to you now, what names you use. What does that look like for you?
Yeah, I think I grew up with a God that was created in the image of a man, and I have no interest in, in that image anymore. Yeah, it was this like progressive, like shift from seeing God as a man with a face to potentially a woman to not even human, like to just see the natural order in nature. So like I know that's a big leap, but to get rid of like the humanoid image, like when I think of God, like I don't God is no longer embodied, or even the word God. Like I sometimes that gets a little tripped up in kind of these old constructs for me. Yeah, I see more the wonder of the divine and just the manifestation of if I can skip all the way to the present, the manifestation of God or the divine or the natural order in the apple tree in the backyard. We have this older apple tree, and it is so life-giving and abundant. And just, I learned so many spiritual lessons just watching that apple tree after season to season, how you know, it comes to life in the spring and it buds out and it provides fruit. And then it goes dormant and takes a rest period. And I think that is a better teacher for how my spirit moves through the years, and how there are some years where it doesn't produce apples at all. And that's like a really hard lesson for me as someone who's like raised to be productive and to contribute to society, to realize like I need a fallow period too, like every creature does.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love that, and it's so hard. It's as humans where we've created these comforts that make it possible for us to do things well beyond after night falls, well beyond when the winter comes and we should be resting. There's still this expectation of the same amount of productivity regardless of season.
Yeah. Or just how they're so like, again, like we're talking just narrowly about religion, but I think I'm more preoccupied with just the inequality in society economically right now. And just realizing, again, the lessons from the apple tree is that there's so much abundance in nature. Like all of our needs can be met. Seeing how the apple tree meets the needs of the squirrels and the birds, and how it's connected to the mycelium and the soil, and it provides food and nourishment, not just for me, but all of the insect and wildlife. It produces more apples. My God, like I'm filling up like 3 or 4 bins to just throw away of like apples that hit the ground, that are less edible. I mean, you could still like I don't have the capacity to even process everything that comes through, and I'm giving bags away to the neighbors, and I'm putting bags out on the fence for the kids that are walking to school to take, like where people are coming to harvest them. Like it's just so many apples. Again, it's just one tree.
Yeah. Yeah, it's this philosophy of abundance in a world that has scarcity.
Yeah. So I spend a lot of time meditating on the lessons of the apple tree, just realizing like how much, yeah, how all of our needs as humans are, it just could be met by just being more in tune with the natural systems. And yet we've come up with all these structures and rules, and we don't live with generosity in our abundance. And so some people have so much less. And then that gets me back to thinking about where this all started for me, being in relationship with people living in downtown Portland on the streets who had so little. So it doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah, you mentioned spirituality of the apple tree, or those lessons you learned from that, and the natural order of nature, I guess, of the world and the way that things happen in the natural world. And I'm curious if are there any other definitions of what spirituality means for you? When you think of the term spirituality, what is that?
I think, I think it's paying attention to what is and what's in front of you. The apple tree is next to the garden beds that I tend, which are also surrounded by like pollinator habitat that I've built and hedgerows of native plants. Yeah, I spend a lot of time in the garden just noticing what is happening and my place in all of it, as in some ways a caretaker to the garden space. That is a place where I'm interacting and tending to the land, but it also helps me shift to when I'm out and about in the world, not necessarily like in the city, but out on trails or whatever, to like pay attention to what's in front of me. And I think those are the most beautiful moments, to be in nature and to feel like such a small part, a speck in this really intricate web of life. But then I'm able to breathe easier out there and then come back to the city and pay more attention to the people in my life, and to slow down and to connect and not make assumptions about what people want or need, but to meet them where they're at. It just helps me be more intentional.
Are there any practices or rituals or routines that you have that help nourish your spirit and soul?
The simplest one is just taking the coffee or the tea out to the chair in the garden whenever I get out there first thing, and to sit quietly and wait for the bees to wake up, especially in the summer. We call it bee coffee. My husband and I will sit out there together. The birds will sometimes join us, but just watching all of the native bees wake up, not necessarily the European honeybees, but a little sweat bees or like the very sleepy bumblebees, or it's quite sweet. So I think that's the most accessible thing. Not everyone can run off. At least I have not been well enough or physically able to run off to summit a mountain to have some sort of like big experience in nature. I to just pay attention to what's happening in my neighborhood on walks with the dog, or what's happening in my backyard in the garden. Yeah. Very simple things. I try to notice, like I've been mentioning, like it's been so dry and sunny, and bulbs that normally don't poke up till March are already breaking through. So just, paying attention, the timing of things.
Do you have anything that you do to mark the changing seasons?
My partner and I really love celebrating the winter and the summer solstices. It's like tied to our personal story and relationship, but the light really impacts like our sense of mood and well-being. So celebrating the height of summer is always a little bit bittersweet as the days start growing shorter and shorter until winter solstice. And really celebrating on winter solstice the return of the sun, or about mid-January after you've made it through like the 10 darkest weeks of the year.
Mm-hmm. What are the things you do to celebrate the solstices?
At this point, we don't have like a specific family tradition around winter solstice, although that is our wedding date. So it isn't a time of anniversary, but we often spend time sitting in front of a fire, acknowledging the darkness and trying to hold on to the things that buoy our spirits
Mm-hmm.
until the full return of the sun. Winter solstice is hard, but it's hopeful. The family tradition in the summer is we take an annual camping trip with friends and try to invite as many people to the coast to have a big bonfire on the beach to welcome the height of summer, those longer days. So yeah, so winter is very much focused on just our family community, and summer is focused on our larger extended circle.
Are there any presences or beings or energies that you feel connected to right now?
Not necessarily. I feel an affinity with the birds in my backyard. That they bring me the most delight. Yeah, I've really it's kind of challenging to talk about like my childhood image of God because I've really sort of abandoned that. So like I don't have a being or deity or anything that is attractive at all right now.
Mm-hmm. And does that feel like good for you?
Yeah, it feels very freeing. I think, yeah, with the sad state of the world, like so much of our like human conflict and strife is like just so unnecessary and just un uncomprehensible to myself. Like, if you're an American, you should be promoting the freedoms of other people around you, whether it's to play sports or to marry who they want or the right to migrate.
Mm-hmm.
When we embrace a spirituality that is free, it helps us just be more comfortable with who we are in our own identity, but then hopefully being more accepting of people and all of their identities and however they show up and just meeting them where they're at and trying to help them live the most authentic versions of their lives, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it's a sense of when you're grounded and you're in your own spirituality, you don't need others to agree with you. You don't need everyone. Yeah, you you don't need everything to be the same, and you can celebrate the way that people make it. That's different.
Yeah, and it's just I explained this to my neighbor the other day because he was really confused to meet me and then understand that I had grown up in such a like strict Catholic household. And I was like, Jesse, like my perspective on it now is that like your religion is for you. Like it's not like it's to guide and inform your own personal morality and inform your spirituality. I see religion and spirituality as being different, but your religion is for you. It's not there to impose on other people. And even if you want to get like super Christian about it, like it's just bad theology to like force your beliefs on other people, like specifically from the Judeo-Christian culture. Like the call and response to Christianity should be an invitation. Like Jesus invited his apostles to follow them. He didn't say, hey, like, go murder all of those Samaritans.
Hmm.
They don't know what they're doing or they're doing it wrong. Like, it was an invitation to come follow me and then to share that good news. It was never about domination or coercion. And it's just so sickening to me that that's where so much of our struggle in society is just want to really coerce and force people to think and do like us or we need control over them and their bodies and their beliefs. Yeah, that's why like religion can be super problematic if it's something that we force on other people.
Mm-hmm.
or every time we force it on it. Like religion should be for you to inform your spirituality in your relationship with the divine, however you define that for yourself. And that's it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you talked about Jesus saying, come and follow me. Like he didn't say, come and follow me or you're going to hell. Like that wasn't part of it. You mentioned, religion being a way for people to guide their spirituality and the way they live their life. And I'm curious if there are truths that you live by that guide you.
Are there truths that I live by that guide me, right?
Inner truths, values.
Yeah. I believe that everyone should get to live their own authentic lives, like fully and completely, and however they identify. So I feel like that is part of like our journey here on in this walk in life, is to like really understand and know ourselves, and what can we do as a human community, not only interacting with other humans, but also with all these other living beings, to allow them their full expression in life. So yeah, I think it comes back to like freedom and the pursuit of identity and questions around meaning and connectiveness. Yeah, I feel like all people in this world like want dignity and respect and love, and have some capacity to share that with others around them.
Yeah. And there are those big questions that religion provides answers for. Are there any that you are sitting with right now?
From religion?
Just the big questions that of humans often, like where do we come from? What's our purpose? What is it like after death? Those kinds of things that religion provides an answer for.
Yeah, and it's funny, like, that doesn't matter to me anymore. Where do we come from? Where are we going? No one knows. But what we have is now. I don't understand how a spider hatches from an egg and understands this complex engineering of how to spin a web between the front post, on my porch and the tree across the yard. And yet they do. Like, I don't need to understand where the spider comes from or how it knows how to weave a web. I don't need to know where humans come from or where we're going. We and my family are preparing for the death of a matriarch in our family. My nana's 94. I know physically where her body will be buried, but the memory of her is something I get to carry beyond death, and her story. So I think for me, it's like what's more important is like the now and our stories and the stories we tell ourselves, both about the past and how we share those stories going forward to the next generation. Like, you can think of all those ancient civilizations, and we're just they exist in some ways because there's some physical evidence left behind, but we try to piece together their stories. And if we have those stories, we share those and preserve those and honor those. And at least culturally, that's what we do as humans. But no, like, as I've freed myself from the restraints of religion, my spirituality doesn't feel like those questions are as important as how am I spending my time today?
Mm-hmm.
Who am I interacting with? Am I of service to my community today? And how can I be of service to them tomorrow?
Yeah. That's lovely.
I don't get to control my story when I'm gone.
Yeah. This is true.
So I'm sort of letting that go. I think I've thought, as I'm becoming a mother, that like my mothering will be my legacy, right? Like, in how this child enters the world and hopefully lives a longer life than me, and how they interact with the world beyond what I'm, there to witness. But
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I don't have control over that. So it's letting go of like, maybe that's not an important question, at least not for me personally.
Yeah. No, it may not be. It was when I looked that up because I was like, oh, yeah, there's these big questions about what it means to be human or origin, purpose, values, afterlife, suffering, healing, belonging, and the unknown. I was like, yeah, a lot of those, like some, I don't have the question of like, why do we suffer? Why don't we suffer? It's just something that is. And so, yeah, we've just been told that that's important in our various religious faiths because that, was questioned. Maybe were questions that people had, but
Yeah, well, and I think Heraclitus was like, you can never step in the same river twice. There's just this constant change in life, and it will never be what is in this moment. And I conceptualize that even with just my emotions. Like my emotions, I try to picture them as clouds, sometimes or as dark storms that are passing through, and they will pass. Relationships in my lives, like my grandmother has always been a part of my life, and maybe a more distant part as I live over 1,000 miles away. But she will pass in the next few weeks, and she will no longer physically be here, but I will have her story. So, not that she's a cloud moving through, but she is an entity in my life that is physically here, and that I will cherish her memory as a blessing and her stories, and they will inform me as I hopefully get to be a matriarch of my own family someday long into the future. But yeah, it's just like the apple tree, like each season, again, it's cyclical, but it's also each season is temporary.
mm-hmm. And they're different.
And they're always different.
They're always different every year. There's some shifts.
Or sometimes there's too many apples and sometimes there's none at all. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. And the apple tree just stays as it is.
Yeah.
Doesn't feel like it needs to change anything. Yeah. Where do you find community, spiritual support?
I initially, again, found it in that like religious structure. So like the nuclear family and extended family structure. So again, that's where like religion is a great scaffold, right? But then as you branch out, I found community with when I was more involved in like working outside the home with coworkers, with people I played soccer with in a more deep way, with different circles, specifically of like women identifying people who have had similar upbringings as me in terms of religion, but found that that was limiting, especially as female identifying bodies, um, and have sought out some sort of spirituality. I found it, with hiking partners and through mountaineering. Like, I guess it's relationship. That's the answer to your question.
That's where you get your spiritual nourishment is through relationship. And yeah. And so what shape do you see your spirituality taking now and going forward? Are there things that you're exploring or new places that you're finding nourishment?
Well, I think this is interesting to have this conversation 5 weeks out from like potentially, well, I know it's going to happen in some way. I don't know when, but giving birth to this small human. I'm in the place of just like shedding everything that doesn't serve me right now and preparing that my big world is going to be very small. It might be in the walls of my home for a little while as I nourish and protect this very fragile life that's, entering the world and our family. So I anticipate that, and I'm letting go of like even having coffee with the bees in the morning. Like, I don't know if I'll have the energy for that, but, bathing and nursing and washing up and cleaning up after a child may be my future spiritual practice for the next several years. You will see, like, it's very much, again, I'm just trying to relinquish my need to have control out of a certain outcome or it's going to look a certain way. I'm just trying to stay in a place of curiosity and openness to see what unfolds.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I like the idea of that idea, like a sacred act of caring for someone after birth and before death as well. And throughout life, really.
Yeah. So one outgoing and one incoming.
Yeah. Well, is there anything else that you want to share?
No, I think just in reflecting on my own journey, the more I let go, the more comfortable and grounded I am. I'm trying to remember what Ron said. I'm going to misquote him. I wish I could give you some like elegant, beautiful thing, but Father Ron, the one who introduced me to that like deeper sense of spirituality as being in true community rather than engaging in just charity work. He often talked about being with people in a way where we could, we're, we're gonna unravel at some point. Like if we're like a strung up like ball of yarn, like, but it's better to be with people that can help us unwind and loosen, if that makes sense. So instead of just unraveling and falling apart, being with community members that can help us release those unnecessary tensions within our own hearts, minds, or souls, and unwind rather than unravel. There, the difference being that a little bit of intentionality in it being held and being unwound rather than either getting more knotted up or just unraveling.
And when you say unraveling, I mean, I immediately think of like emotionally unraveling. And it sounds like you're talking about like that spiritual unraveling or.
Yeah, spiritual, it could be emotional, physical, like maybe less so. But yeah, as what I'm trying in the most inarticulate way to say is, as I have just let go of like expectations of this is how I need it to be, and just accepting what is, things just make more and more sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. Is there anything you want to leave with our listeners to savor? Anything that has been a mantra for yourself or an important piece of wisdom that you've carried with you?
I mean, the mantra that I'm sitting with recently is how we spend our days is how we spend our life. And you can narrow it down to how we spend our moments is how we spend our lives. And just trying to be really intentional with this moment is all I have. Don't have control over what is happening in the world or next or for my partner or this child that I'm in the world. All I have is now. Just trying to breathe into the now and then do the next right thing.
If something in today's conversation stirred recognition, curiosity, or a quiet yes within you, I want you to know that the Spacious Unknown is always open to new voices. If you feel called to share your own unfolding spiritual story, you can apply to be a guest by clicking the link in the show notes. The Spacious Unknown is part of Unfurl, my publication on Substack, and is produced by Embodied Conversations, LLC. Thank you for listening with care and presence. Until next time, may you continue to listen for what is true in the wide and spacious unknown.